Okay, somebody said something to me, but I didn't quite catch it.
Are we live now, Madeline?
You are live now.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to the April 2023 monthly meeting of the Maritime Advisory Board. My name is Terry Lomax, and as I do each time, I just go around my screen, the order of my screen, and introduce everyone. We first have Alderman Arnett, Alderman from Ward 8. We have Alan Miller, who is a member of the board. We have Duncan Hood, who is a member of the board. We have Frida Wilde, who's a member of the board. We have Jake Iverson, who is a guest participant. We have Debbie Goslin, a member of the board. We have Stephen Rice from the city. We have Scott Allen, a member of the board. We have Madeline, who is our COA TV guru. Tyler Northfield is here on behalf of the Harbor Master's Office. Kimberly Consoli is our recording secretary. And we have a guest this evening, Burr Vogel from the Department of Public Works. And as I told Mr. Vogel and Mr. Gerald, when I invited Mr. Vogel, that we would take him first. So we will do so. Mr. Vogel, the reason we've asked you or somebody from Public Works to come to the meeting is that Public Works obviously is involved in a number of programs with the various street end, I call them street end parks, street end access. And we have been having the Harbor Master update us each week or each month, on the status of those, because those street end access points are of particular importance to the boating community on both Spa Creek and Back Creek. And so it's important to keep abreast of the status. And one of the things that caught our eye was that the 6th Street street end has a grant, but the grant was set to expire. And one of the reasons, the main reason that we're particularly interested in 6th Street, not to say we're not interested in the others, is that the 6th Street end is a primary access point for boaters on Back Creek into Eastport and then into the city. There we know there is an access at 4th Street, but that particular access is rather constrained for dinghies. It's small. It's a little bit difficult to get into. It's tucked away basically at the foot of 4th Street by Davis's Pub, whereas 6th Street has the ability or has the potential for being a much more effective dinghy landing. And so when we saw that the grant was going to might expire, we felt it important to convey to the Department of Public Works our concern that the 6th Street should be a priority and certainly should not drop off the list. And hence my request to David Gerald for an update on what was going on. So with that long-winded background, I'll let you tell us what's been happening.
The question will be much longer than the answer. The answer is the grant has been extended for 2 years. We're good through 2025.
Well, that's very good. The second question is then, what is then the projected status or the projection for getting progress on it?
I plan to start design in July when the budget is passed for the next fiscal year.
That then defers Alderman Arnett to say that, yes, you will have a budget in July.
Yeah, well, I think this budget is going to slide right through pretty easily, frankly. Okay. And I will definitely be paying attention to money for the 6th Street end. I do think that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that I think there's going to be some conflict with Safe Harbor in terms of access of the boats coming out of those slips on the Down Creek side, because the dock ramp extends quite a ways out because of the height of that street end. So I'm not sure this is going to go quietly, but I think we definitely, for reasons you said, Terry, definitely need to have that access point.
And this is, I assume this, we're just talking the standard street end dinghy access. We're not talking about people coming in with a 46-foot boat and tying up or anything.
Oh, the electric ferries are coming there.
Well, that leads me.
Now, we're talking about standard dinghies.
Okay.
And the drawings that I've seen show dinghies on all three sides, but that does bring it very close. And I think, our marinas are an important part of our maritime life too. And so we need to figure out how we can make sure everybody comes out of this, hopefully in some win-win kind of a situation. So I'm keeping an eye on it, and I'm keeping an ear open to hear from Safe Harbor when they start to focus more on the plans.
All right.
So
Well,
I have been in touch with them. I reached out for somebody to make a connection with me when we were getting ready to start the design. The first person I heard from was their lawyer. So that's never a great sign. But
No.
all kidding aside, it was a very helpful and productive meeting. We're started off on a cooperative note anyway. But certainly I want to minimize the impact to their slips.
Yeah, and to that end, one of the things that I talked about was instead of having the ramp come right out of the center line of 6th Street, maybe we can move it upstream to try. I mean, I want everybody to come out of this being happy, or at least as happy as they can be. And our marinas, as I said, are very important to life in the city, just as our street and park. So we want to make a good accommodation for everybody as we can.
I look forward to it. And at some point, Mr. Vogel, if you would, when you get a little better handle on the design, if you could share just a PDF of the design with me, I'll share it with the board. That just makes it helpful for us if we get questions when we're not in a meeting. At least we're familiar with what the proposal is going to be.
I certainly will, Terry.
All right. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Vogel while we have him here on that? Mr. Allen has a question for you.
Yes, I think that's great what you're doing. And I'm a fan of 3rd Street, and not just because there's pirate ships on it, but the end of 3rd Street is below water. And I go down there often enough to do business things. And is there anything that we can help the city maybe raise the end of, I don't know, Mike, you probably know about a lot more than I do, but if we raise the end of the street, just brought it up the last 30 feet, about 2 feet, it would probably mitigate having to walk in water half the time. And there's now sediment developing on the inside. It's filling it up anyway. But it seems a natural place that with some minimal grading and a little paving and a couple of sidewalk adjustments could maybe mitigate having to walk through water down there. And sometimes you can't even park your car on the street. So Mike is the expert on that one, but I'm a fan to maybe do something down there, not just to help Mike in the pirate ships, but it seems like that is not necessarily, it's a street end and you can have dinghies tying the outside, but you climb over the bulkhead and you've got water on the inside as well. So just a thought.
And we're talking about the Back Creek side or Spot Creek side?
Spot Creek, I'm sorry, Spot Creek side.
Spot Creek, okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty ridiculous.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, I've been down. I've paid a lot of attention to 5th Street, but not so much 3rd. I know I walked down there one time, but I'll definitely take another look and see what we can do.
So Scott or Mike, the next time you see it flooded, perhaps give Burr a call, and then he can come down when it's, when we know it's flooded, rather than just kind of come down and look at it generically.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, the answer is yes. And there's also, I think, Mike, sort of tide lines on the bulkhead there. You can see where the tide has been when it's a couple feet up. And it floods long before City Dock floods. Let me tell you that.
Okay.
Absolutely. And
Duncan, did you
one quick
have
comment.
something?
Whoever put together the status of the street end parks, thank you. They did a great job.
that was Tyler's office, the harbor master's office. I think Beth probably got tired of having to do it from memory, and now she's got it on a Word Perfect or Microsoft Word that she can just update or have Tyler update as we go along.
You betcha.
We'll come back
She
to the rest
tasks
of
me with a
those.
good bit of that, so I'm going to take a little
Okay.
credit there.
Good. But yeah, that is very helpful and help shorten our discussion monthly. All right, anybody else have anything for Burr?
I thought I saw Mike raise his hand.
Oh, Scott,
Did Mike raise his hand? I thought I saw him raise his hand.
he's mute. All right, thank you
I
again.
was just gonna add, Terry, I was contacted by the city a couple of months ago to provide just pictures of sunny day flooding in Eastport, which I've been doing regularly. 5th Street, 4th Street on the back street, on the Back Creek side, and 3rd Street on the Spa Creek side.
And that was pursuant to the request a couple of months ago. I can't remember who made the request, but they were looking for information, looking for pictures and information. So,
Yep, you got it.
all right, anybody else? All right, now you're excused. Thank you very much.
Okay,
If we have any further questions, I know where to find you, but I appreciate you joining us this evening.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay. All right, let's just turn to the agenda. First item on the agenda is the approval of the March minutes. And I need to find the March minutes. There were a couple of changes. Kimberly quickly made the updates, and we now have the revised proposed minutes. So the first question is, does anybody else have any suggested changes to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve or adopt the minutes? Mr. Hood has moved, Mr. Miller has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Kimberly, unanimous. The March minutes are approved. There was no, I got off lucky. There was no March MIAB meeting. Alan, I think you're next online on the list for May. I'm sorry, April. It's next, so 4th Monday. If you don't have the link, let me know and I can forward it to you. But it's, if you go online to the county website and Google Maritime Industry Advisory Board, they give you all the information. I guess, Stephen, it's you for economic development update, eco gardening, etc.
Oh, there's nothing happening. Oh boy. Well, thank you. Glad to be here. I'll start off with some of the economic statistics that we have. Last month, economic development, we supported 30 businesses and partners. There were 2 new businesses that opened in the city, and our vacancy rate combined is 6.4%. I think there are probably more than 2 businesses that opened, new businesses last month, that being March, but we're transitioning to Intergov, which is our new, of course, permitting and reporting system. So I think that's probably just a reflection of that transition. A couple of other things that are happening. Our seasonal parklet program is now underway. It was launched just yesterday. Our pilot parking lot program is still in effect until October, I believe, and Alderman Arnett can correct me because it was his legislation that extended it. We're spending a lot of time dealing with the economic development budget, and of course, we're a component of planning and zoning. So we have a hearing tomorrow with the Finance Committee of the City Council. That's tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. to talk through the budget. And there will be further discussions at the Economic Matters Committee meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30 for anyone who's interested. The Hillman Garage grand opening is being planned, and we're working with the mayor's office on that. We're looking at June for the garage to be fully operational, as I understand it. Let's see here. The Annapolis Blues, which is our new soccer team, they'll be playing at Navy Marine Corps Stadium. Their season opener is June 3rd, and we're very excited about that. We also have a speed lending event that we are coordinating with the Small Business Administration and the Maryland Small Business Development Council, and that will be May 11th at Pitt Moyer. All right, I have one more.
Okay, go ahead. All right, go ahead.
More. And of course, I probably don't need to let this group know, but there is a spring sailboat show in Annapolis, April 28th through the 30th. So we're excited about that as well. So that's probably enough from me. And
Hey, Stephen,
yes.
what is a speed lending event?
So this is a first for me, but not a first for Annapolis. Essentially, lenders, i.e. banks, set up booths in, they'll each have a table at Pitt Moyer, and we'll call it a booth. And local businesses will have the opportunity to have, brief conversations with them, talk about their financing needs, their growth plans, and all that kind of stuff. And then the bankers, of course, can talk about rates and terms and, that sort of thing. It's gotten good reviews in the past. I haven't participated in anything like this before, but the local SBA reached out to us and they wanted to revive it, and they were thinking that there's some interest. So we're pretty excited about it, and making sure that businesses have access to capital. So
All right, well, let's hope it goes well. That sounds like a great idea.
How is that being publicized, or businesses know that it's there?
So from the economic development standpoint, we have pushed it out via our newsletter, our economic development news alert, and we're partnering with the SBDC and the SBA. They're pushing it out through their channels as well. We've also done I want to say 1 or 2 mass emails, but we'll be ramping it up, of course, in the next few weeks, the closer we get to the event.
It would just occurred to me, and maybe it certainly may have already occurred to you, that there are various of the community business groups, Eastport Business Association, West Annapolis, et cetera, that provide a point of contact. I assume that they've already been included. Maybe Mike can confirm as for EBA, but
I hope Mike got the email.
I do regularly get the emails, but while I have you on the phone, and I know you've already said it once, but say it again. What's the date?
This is May 11th at Pitt Moyer, and the start time, I believe, is 10 o'clock. I think we're doing 10 to noon.
Got it. Stephen, can you get some publicity in the Evening Capital or Gazette, whatever you call it?
I'll look at our budget and see if we can pull that off.
They might do just a public article on it without you having to pay for anything
That's a good idea.
on the business page, if they have one that week.
Alan.
Stephen, Bay Bulletin and Chesapeake Bay would probably do that one for free. I can probably mention it to them if you're interested.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So now the question I have is, what are the Annapolis Blues, obviously a soccer team, and what league do they play in?
So it's the Annapolis Blues Football Club, and they are a soccer team. And the league that they play in is the NPSL, which is the National Premier Soccer League, and it's essentially a minor league for the Major League Soccer.
And when was that formed? I'm impressed, but I do.
I'm not sure when it was formed, but I'll say, smaller markets like Annapolis are their bread and butter. And let me think, the first game is actually going to be against Frederick. So
Okay.
that should be fun.
Very interesting. Frida.
Yes, Stephen, I have just two quick questions. Are there any changes or updates to outdoor dining and the parklets? And second, who enforces the noise ordinances for outdoor dining? Some of my neighbors are having some issues and want to know who to contact. Thank you.
There are some minor changes to the outside dining program. We're going to be utilizing a flat rate of $25 instead of the schedule that we used that had different prices for different neighborhoods. That's probably the biggest change. And another change is, more, minor policy changes. We're going to make sure that before, last year was different because we were coming out of the recovery zones and everything we were under one set of rules and then we moved into another, and making that transition was very difficult. Not so much for the city, but more so for the businesses. And, once we no longer had a state of emergency and we had to start enforcing city code, it became challenging, probably all around. So we won't have that framework this go round. So we think it'll be smoother. But we have made some internal tweaks to try to ensure that everything is smoother. As far as noise ordinances, I believe that is the police department. And as I understand it, I believe they have a noise, some sort of sound machine that can measure decibel levels. And I know that in the past, there have been challenges with regard to, as I recall, having the right people trained to use it, but I can't trust my memory on this. And I believe it's the police department.
Okay, thank you very much.
Actually, if I could speak, Terry,
Sure.
the police department can be called, but they've told me they don't have decibel meters. The other group that could be called, except we don't have them, are the people from the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board that are supposed to be enforcing the 2 a.m. Licensing and that sort of thing. And when we did the change to 2 a.m. in the legislation, we called for hiring 2 enforcement people, but that never occurred. So the reality is, and I think the frustration, I think I know who some of the neighbors are who are complaining and why they're complaining, is it's like many other things in the city. We can pass high-minded or well-intended legislation, but when we don't enforce it, it doesn't have a lot of meaning. So that is one of my ticking points for discussion in the city budget, is a lot more enforcement across the board, but particularly sound. And of course, it's brought very much to the fore with outdoor dining because that's right on top of neighbors. Now, I was successful in getting the code changed, so all outdoor dining and drinking has to stop everywhere in the city at 10 o'clock. That's a consistent rule. But
I hope that only applies to commercial establishments.
no, your house too, Terry. We've been getting a lot of complaints. The bakery people are complaining about noise from your house, Baker and Co. Yeah, so we have a lot of work to get on enforcement across the city. It's not very sexy, and department heads, directors tend to want to hire bigger hitters and more professionals and so forth. But lack of enforcement, I think, is a constant complaint that I hear across the board from constituents.
So Ross, I mean, we see it whether it's outside of usually outside of either a liquor store, the 7-Elevens or whatever, we often see off-duty police officers who have been hired. Is there a mechanism that, I mean, that might be enticing for, an off-duty police officer who's already got, police authority, to moonlight instead of standing around in front of Eastport Liquors, they follow up on complaints.
Well, so that I doubt the restaurants would want to make an investment in that. That would be something where the city might want to have some
Right.
incentives. I actually, because of the shortage of sworn officers, have been broaching the notion of police auxiliary who don't have to be sworn officers, but who could show up at traffic crashes and help direct traffic instead of having 4 of our 6 on-duty police officers there. And they can be doing school crossings, but they could also be doing some of these enforcement issues. And decibel readers do not cost very much, and they're actually not hard to learn how to use. So we could be using the auxiliary police to help with those kinds of enforcements. They could also be doing enforcement when people have illegal accessory dwelling units. I mean, we have enforcement issues across the board. So that would be a budget issue if the city were going to do that. I worry about our officers because they sometimes do 2 shifts, and they're long shifts. And of course, they're under a lot of duress in those shifts. And then to do these moonlighting activities, I just wonder how much we can pile on them. And that's why I like this idea of some sort of an auxiliary officer force.
All right, and the
Thank you, Ross.
last thing that I just mentioned that Stephen mentioned, I actually had a conversation with Eileen Fogarty about a week ago, and I was pleased to hear, and Stephen echoed it, that the garage is on schedule and apparently reasonably on budget. So I mean, I won't say it's a milestone, but that's certainly very encouraging given the size and complexity of that project, that we're going to be seeing a garage opening up and then be able to roll into the city dock after the boat shows, I guess. But that's encouraging, not only just for the city, for any Maritime, for everybody, that we get the garage gets up and running on time and usually on budget.
And then we can go back to having in-person meetings, not virtual meetings. But Stephen, maybe you've looked at it. When I looked out at the garage today, I noticed there's no stairway coming from the garage towards City Hall. So I don't know how employees and elected officials and committee members get to and from the garage.
I thought the bus from from Knighton Garage stops at City Hall.
All right, if you want to hear some howling and caterwauling, I think that's what David Gerald is very much thinking, is that city employees will still use Park Place for free, but pay if they want to use Hillman Garage. That's going to be interesting.
That's going to be noise.
I suggest before he proposes that, buy those decibel meters. All right, Stephen, can you give us just a brief update on where we are on the task force annual reports? I know data was being collected, but I don't know where we haven't seen any reports.
Sure. So yeah, I'll speak to that. we had identified 47 properties where we needed to have a report on what was happening with regard to maritime versus non-maritime. That was our initial outreach. We extended it, internally, the collection time, for lack of a better time, for lack of a better word, for the reports. And when we looked at it again, there are only 46 properties that were truly relevant. And so we've received reports from 11 properties. We have a 24% response rate, which is not great, even though, of course, this is the first time that the city has undertaken this initiative. We've done additional outreach. I sent another letter out asking for reports to come in by the 1st of May. And I also made sure that the letter had language in there letting the property owners know that they can just email the information to me as another alternative, or they can also call me if need be. And so we don't really have enough data to even do preliminary analysis, but that's where we are. Essentially, we're still chasing down the information from the property owners.
All right, well, we'll just keep it on the agenda so that we're going to ask you about it or ask somebody about it each month until we get enough responses that we can make some meaningful determinations on how it's working.
Terry,
Yes, ma'am.
Jake has his hand up. I'm not sure how
Sorry
long
about
it's been
that,
up.
Jake. You got to turn on your mic. There you go.
Yeah, just a quick question, going back to the parking garage. It's still a June opening. I know that they were waiting on elevators, and that was a holdup for them. Are they not waiting on those anymore? Do we know?
I understood that the plan was that the elevators were not available, that they were going to either make they were going to open and perhaps make accommodation by how many elevator required spaces they just simply put on the first floor or whatever. I haven't heard anything. I did not hear that was any longer a holdup. But then I'd earlier heard that it wasn't going to be a holdup even if they didn't have elevators. That we were going to.
Got it. I was under the impression there would be a soft opening and that until they received
Right.
the elevators, and then it would be fully
That's
operational.
Yeah, I might have misspoken when I said fully operational.
Yep, understood. Let's see. Oh, going back to a decibel meter, we have a decibel meter in our operations barge right at City Dock if anyone ever wants to come by and use it. Aside from that, going back to the Annapolis Blues, I'm part of the ownership group. Watermark is also sponsoring, and Mike Tomasini is also part of the sponsorship group. It's going to be great. So early this summer, they brought the idea to Annapolis. There's a lot of teams in our league. The ownership group is a couple guys from the MLS. Michael Hitchcock from Playbook Management. He owns 13 teams altogether. It's a very impressive group. We've received large sponsorships from Luminous Health, Giant Foods, Picante Forward, Rise Up Coffee. The list just goes on. It's rather impressive. We've sold about 2,500 season tickets. Our first game's May 10th. At Navy Marine Corps Stadium. So it's going to be really neat.
This has been, I read the Capitol every day, and I must say it's flown under my radar. I'm very impressed that it's that organized and has come that far, has got that much sponsorship and that many season tickets. That's great.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
All right, anything else? Let me look and see. I don't think there's anything else for you, Stephen, looking down at my list. So I thank you for those updates. Tyler, you want to just give us you had sent around the updated status of the street and parks. And is there anything, and we obviously had Burr on earlier, is there anything you need to add or tell us?
The only good thing news we have is that Cheston should be starting in the middle of May. So that's a huge milestone. We've been waiting for that for quite a while. So that should be construction by May 15th.
All right, and
Quick one. Hey, Tyler,
Justin,
have you guys got an eye on 3rd Street over at Spa? We talked about that before you came on.
3rd Street, on the Eastport side of 3rd Street. Yes.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with Public Works that haven't cleaned that out once before already.
Yeah,
It is on our radar. I haven't been over there lately, but I can definitely have Public Works go over there and some of the street sweepers there to clean the street up at least for the time being.
yeah, we're kind of wondering if we can somehow get that in the mix of things, because it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's definitely bad. I think was there redevelopment of those 2 properties? Pier work, I think, on
Can't
3rd
tell you.
Street. I think it was talked about. I'll have to follow up with Beth about that, figure that out.
this was 3rd Street at on
Spa.
Spa Creek.
Spot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that was the one that we were talking about. If it next time it floods, is either Scott or Mike is going to call Burr and he's going to come over and also take a look at it. But then it's fairly obvious what needs to. It's fairly obvious what the situation is. What needs to be done may be more of an engineering challenge, but it's obvious that what the issue is.
Definitely needs work.
Anybody else have any questions for Tyler? Mike?
Yeah, and I think Tyler has actually been there before. Some of it is an engineering challenge, and I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to speak to it. But some of the ideas that have been bandied about are like a one-way valve that allows water from the street to escape without allowing water from the harbor to flow in. Now's actually a decent time to explore it from a public works perspective because of the gas line and the water main work that's going to happen on that street. It's going to be repaved either way. So if we're going to experiment with something, I'm going to guess that this would be a good time to do that. Outside of Tyler, are we planning on continuing the discussion on the Truxton Park electrical current? Because I'm reading over this email.
You got that long email that I sent out?
I'll give you an
I've read the
update
email.
on. I'm
I
going to
don't
give you
plan
an
on holding
update on
Tyler
that.
to it, but we should really dive into this, I think.
I have an update on that once we get when we're done with the street ends. Because even after Tyler sent the memo around from Jackie Guild, sort of summarizing a lot of it, I reached out to who's the head of inspections and permits? John Manessa. I reached out to John Manessa and asked him if he could have someone provide us an update. Turns out that Clint Pratt, who is one of the electrical inspectors, longtime electrical inspector for the city, is the one that is coordinating or honchoing this from the city's from at least from inspections end. He is going to come to our meeting next in May and give us an update on what they're doing. Update the memo, I guess, that came out April 14th from Jackie about it. But he's the one that's apparently the point person, and we look forward to hearing from him in May. So that's the update. Unless Tyler, if you've got anything else.
No, it's over my head really when it comes to electrical in the water like that. So Clint's the guy I talked to.
Okay.
Got it. Because that part of the concerning part, at least it's in the beginning of the email that was sent around, if everybody's read it, is that they did kind of do a source check for electrical current at other marinas in the area, and that while they found it present, it doesn't it doesn't have the same potential downside because the docks at the Annapolis city-owned marina are metal, which elevates the risk. And if there's a solution to that, that's something I think we need to explore right away.
I agree. They definitely did. They put a whole bunch of grounding rods. I knew that at Truxton. So
What is a RONC?
grounding rods. It's like that.
Grounding rods.
On the
Okay.
email, I don't know. I emailed Jackie to get a response back, but I didn't get one.
Yeah, I mean, the email from what Jackie sent was in part forwarding a text from an email received from BG&E that seemed to talk about the fact that some of this may be from a substation, and instead of going back, the unused electricity so let me back up. So apparently a substation provides X amount of available power and based on anticipated needs of those being served by that substation. If in fact all of that quote power is not being used at any given time, it is supposed to go back to the main station or the next station back up the line by way of ground wires. However, apparently that can happen, that it does not always follow those wires, but instead enters into the soil or the ground itself, and then it migrates to wherever the path of least resistance, which water would be certainly a path of least resistance. And that's the gist that I get from BG&E, and so I guess these ground rods that they're putting in are supposed to now take that ground migration of current and dissipate it elsewhere. But it seems like more of an art than a science at this point.
A little bit of voodoo. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and I don't know where the substation is in relation to how close it is to the water. I'm sure there's a certain, the farther away it would be, the farther away it would be, the less migration through soil or through the ground to the water, as opposed to back on its intended path of ground wires. But we'll have an electrical expert here in May, and perhaps with knowing that he's going to have to explain this to us at a level that we can understand. Maybe they'll be able to come up with a solution between now and then. Also, Tyler, I take it there's no change from the last time in terms of how this year's lease and usage of the dock is proceeding. I know we're using the 2-week lease program, and I assume that's probably already underway, or at least it'll be underway.
Yes, that's correct. That's the only 2 updates. I guess really not updates, but so far so good. The Wimley and the party, what's it called? Party Bed Annapolis. They've been good so far. We're excited.
All right. Any other questions for Tyler at this point?
Maybe we can have our meeting 1 month on the party boat.
There we go.
As long as we don't go past 10 o'clock and we don't go over the decibel limit, we'd be okay.
It's a long stretch for the TV cable.
All right, last on the regular old business is Maryland Maritime Hall of Fame. Alan, you were going to visit Fort Bragg at some point. I don't know if you've had a chance to do that or not.
Yeah, so I did visit Fort Bragg, and true to military tradition, they paid about $22,000 per sign. Per sign, with another $12,000 in maintenance. So I came back and I've got a friend who does a whole lot of welding and runs a small business here in Annapolis. Talked to him. He put me on to some other people. So Scott will talk in a minute. I assume Scott, about some committee things we talked about. But just to put it in kind of a perspective, once I contacted the folks that do this for a living, for each one of those signs, kind of like the ones that are on your port side as you go down Eagle Alley, for each one of those signs, you're looking at about 2,500 a piece. You're looking at about 300 for the pole, 2,500 for the sign, and about 5 weeks delivery. And those are signs treated. It's called tritidium. I don't know. It's called try something. So it's a treatment that prevents it from eroding oceanside or in a high salinity environment. So the signs are not as bad as I thought they were. I think just for budget purposes, because you got to be realistic about it, I think about $3,000 a sign for every sign we wanted would be interesting. And then I'll leave some of the stuff that Scott and I have already talked about to you, Scott, if I might.
Okay, great. And I think the idea that Alan has of putting things around town, historic signage, is a great idea. And it could be on downtown, it could be on street ends, things like that. So I think the implementation is something like that is a good idea. We were talking about how to organize this, and I had a call and I saw Ellen Moyer and she had some comments, but I didn't get a chance to hear back from her today before the meeting. But just thinking out of the box, that the Maryland Maritime Hall of Fame needs to have both a selection committee and a custodial committee to kind of monitor what's going on. And Alan and I were talking about the ideas, but should this be a subcommittee of the Maritime Advisory Board, which might be a natural for it? And I don't have the answers on this, but just questions, and maybe Ross could, work on this with us. But so getting the organization done, and I think, I would say maybe we ought to have a subcommittee of the Maritime Advisory Board that works on this, and get a selection committee, a research committee, how we want to organize this. And then how do you select people? Does the Maritime Advisory Board vote on them? Or is this the committee present nominees? These are all questions that we don't have answers for, but we could try to design something based on other halls of fame, how they operate. But the first question is, do we want this to be a subcommittee responsibility of the Maritime Advisory Board or not? Or do you kick it out to the public domain and hope for the best through the city somewhere? So that's one.
My initial reaction is, number one, we already have a subcommittee formed that is taking the initial lead. You and Alan and Scott Allen, are taking the lead with this. It as an operational entity, and I kind of use that term loosely, and getting them interested might be a challenge, but logically, I would think it would come under if anything, under the Annapolis Maritime Museum as sort of a adjunct to the Annapolis Maritime Museum, to have the idea of, because we're not going to be having a Maryland Hall of Fame facility, but we're having recognition of the broader Maryland Maritime Hall of Fame honorees scattered throughout the city. And I like the idea of a signage program, as opposed to trying to jump full bore into a building, a director, rotating displays. We have a number of variety of signs. There's the sign about the encampment in Eastport that's at the foot of the drawbridge on the Eastport side. There's signage. There's a plaque on Burnside Street on the other end from the bakery about the Bruin farmhouse property, which is still in the corner there. There's other types of signage throughout, and putting something at street ends or other, areas of public access kind of make the most logical sense in terms of signage. And then it could be pointed out on the website that, or at the street, as an adjunct to the street in parks, the signage is available, and even start calling the 6th Street Park as the Arnie Gay, and I'm just picking a name alphabetically out of the air, street end. I mean, there's a variety of things that you can do to highlight the individuals. But I frankly don't think the fact that the Maritime Advisory Board is a city constituted board, what we could take on or not take on, or would want to take on or not take on in terms of managing a program as opposed to a board as we act now. I haven't thought about that really, but that's just my general reaction. But I certainly do think that the two of you continuing to work with Ellen, because I think one of the bigger, an equally big challenge as to how to select people is to how to pay for the signage. And
Right. Perhaps the signs, if they are on city property, be somewhere in a city budget to help out with that part of it, because it is for Annapolis, and maybe the Maritime Museum would be a good home for it, so to speak. And my off the wall thinking is that there should be some kind of operational selection committee, and then maybe a plaque with markers on it, and then have these outside things that Alan's talking about around the city. But where would the home be? That the Maritime Museum was the home of the Annapolis Maritime Hall of Fame. And I don't know what the politics were, but they kind of let it go, and DeFranio picked up on some of the pieces and put them at the Boatyard Bar and Grill. So I think we would want to maybe combine those, and maybe I think the museum is a great place to have it as a home port, so to speak.
well, why don't I suggest
As you
maybe
suggested,
follow
Terry, and I
up
could talk to
with
Elsa
Ellen
and see if they'd be willing to take something on like that. It's a natural thing.
maybe the thing to do is to follow up with Ellen and then set up a meeting, and perhaps she could facilitate it. Set up a meeting with the name of the director of AMM.
Alice Estrada.
Alice Estrada, set up a meeting with Alice Estrada and raise this with her as to, because I know when we started this in about several months ago, I had somebody, I think it might have been Eric Rubin or somebody with AMM brought to my attention, and then I was in the museum, that they did have reference to local Hall of Fame type people in the maritime industry that they had internally in the building from time to time, displays or I don't know, I can't remember what you call it in a museum world, but a display or a recognition. So what I'd suggest is that the two of you, or Scott, you've been talking to Ellen, reach out to Ellen and have her reach out to Alice Estrada and see if we can't, coordinate it with the Maritime Museum. They're obviously probably not going to want to fund it. Then we'll have to just talk about how to fund it, but they also must have some kind of a selection committee process for the things that they do too.
Right. So, okay, well, we can keep working on it one step at a time, and then the Maritime Advisory Board can perhaps just be the catalyst for making this happen.
Right.
Speaking of Ellen, if you pay attention at the Boatyard Bar and Grill over by the main bar, you'll see a whole bunch of bronze plaques that Ellen Moyer spent a lot of money on to honor various sailing and boating heroes. And maybe those can be retrieved. I helped Dick and Mike Myron put those up, but if we're going to have physical manifestations those might want to come back and be part of the collection. And of course, Scott, I'll be happy to work with you on any kind of budget sorts of things that we would need to do.
Right. And those originally, I think, did have a home at the museum, didn't they, Ross? And
I
then-
think so.
I don't know
Yeah.
where the dynamics were, that museum wasn't taking care of them or something, but you and Dick Franjo, they have a good home right now, but museum is a natural for these kind of things, especially if it expands, because you can't keep putting things up the Boatyard Bar and Grill everywhere. So
True.
Are these
So-
these plaques, weatherproof, that they could be mounted on? I mean, they make these, I hesitate to call them tombstones, but headstones, but they make headstones on which you mount things like that, which also could be an alternative to a post and a sign too.
They're
remember-
bronze.
Yeah, they're bronze. They're quite heavy. It was
They're
hard.
heavy.
I was holding them while Dick was screwing, so they are heavy.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
there's
they just have to have that titanium, whatever it is. I apologize for the pronunciation.
that coat, they put that coating on them.
Once you put that coating on them, they're good. They're saltwater.
So
All
Ross, we'll stay in touch with you, and Alan and I can talk to Alan, and maybe she can talk to Alice Estrada, and kind of one step at a time here.
Yeah, I think going through Eric might be smarter initially. See if he and the board are amenable. But we can talk about that offline.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's the news.
All right. Last but not least, we have been deferring the election of a chair and vice chair. I understand that Mr. Allen might entertain a motion, or I'll entertain a motion from Mr. Allen.
My motion was a nomination for vice chair in the name of Mike Tomasini, if he would be so inclined. I'm happy to stay on the board and do whatever the board would like me to do, but I think it's good to get younger blood in there, and Mike's a great person, and so I would nominate him for the co-chair.
And I second the nomination.
And Mr. Tomasini, I prevailed upon to not object. So,
No,
all
I won't object.
all right, all in favor?
I'm all over it like a cheap suit.
Now we have the more troublesome issue of electing the chair.
No trouble. I'd like to nominate Terry Lomax.
Second.
You
All
bet.
right. I'll not have any discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
We shouldn't
You
vote.
bet.
All right. And with that,
Uh,
I will say that the election, the post-election gala ball will be held at a time and location to be announced in the future. It will not run past 10 o'clock, and it will not exceed the decibel level.
This is the way hunters are supposed to work.
Mr. Trogdon, you got here just in time to move to adjourn.
Oh, no. Sorry
He's
about
doing-
that.
It's
Perfect
agreed that
timing.
Peter Trogdon is the new chairman.
Hold on, hold on, Terry. I have just one thing.
Okay,
I'm circling back to an earlier agenda item, just because I think it's really important, and I know that we've got Clint coming in May. I have two concerns about the Truxton Park electrical current, and the first concern is that, one, somebody will be hurt or worse. That's foremost, and then two, I am really worried that it becomes an excuse for the city to limit water access at a place where it is absolutely the most feasible. There's tons of parking there. There's a beach access. There's a ramp for paddlers. And if we decide that nobody can put their feet or hands or something else in the water, we've really lost something there. So in between now and then, I think we should be asking the questions that that I think we need answers when Clint comes back, at least to be prepared for when he's here, so we can figure out exactly, what we recommend as a board.
That's a good point, Mike. And let me ask Tyler right now, what are the restrictions? I know it's a no swimming within X. I don't know how far out that no swimming zone goes, but what else? What other restrictions are there? Are they restricted from launching paddle boards and kayak or paddle boards?
Yeah, so they're restricted to swimming, paddle boards, and kayaking, but you can still launch a boat at the boat ramp.
Okay.
And how do we inform people? How do we inform people that aren't entering the water from the Truxton Park side that there's a danger there?
It's a good question, because we had to put signs up, potential shock in the water all over Truxton. It's all posted with no swimming, no kayaking, no paddle boarding. So that's a good question about the cross from Truxton itself.
Alan?
Sorry, just a quick note, because I'm there quite a lot with my boats and things we do. I see paddleboarders, kayakers launching there every single day that I'm over there. So it's one of those things where, yeah, the signs are up, but nobody really takes the signs seriously. Just because we're there quite a lot. Just food for thought.
Yeah,
All right, I'll now that I have the name of Clint's name, maybe I'll reach out and try to get a little more update before our next meeting in the next week or so, and as to where and what restrictions or lack of restrictions or what alternatives we can provide. Kayaks, well, let me just reach out to him. And Scott, I thought you had your hand up. You moved around on my screen.
Oh, I did have my
Now
hand
you
up.
move back. When you use that little, I never realized when you use that little symbol to put your hand up, you jump to a new location on the screen.
I'm learning too. My question is for Ross. This, both from a safety standpoint and from a recreation standpoint, seems to be pretty high priority. Does the city council have this on the radar screen too? This issue of electricity in Spa Creek?
Not really. And I'm not sure how high priority it is in a lot of places in the city. I keep raising it with both the city manager and the mayor, since he is the other voter on the city council along with me. And it doesn't feel like people know what to do about it.
Until somebody gets hurt.
Yep.
So it just seems like whatever we can do, I agree with Mike, whatever we can do with the Spa Creek or the access points in the city like that, such a good access point, that ought to be a super high priority to get rid of that problem so that it can be better utilized or more safely utilized, I guess you'd say, because as Alan says, it's being utilized anyway, regardless of what signs are up there that Tyler's put up.
So interestingly, as we were having this discussion, I went back to the BG&E technical side of this, and one of the things that caught my eye was this paragraph down towards the bottom. One of our techs from our voltage quality group even went so far as to have a boat take him to various docks in the area to perform random voltage readings. And he saw similar readings as those at Truxton. So the same sort of level of stray current. But he goes on to say the difference is the voltage would be between, say, the water and a metallic water line that is ultimately grounded to earth and out of reach of a person at the same time. The issue at Truxton is the metallic dock and water may be easily touched at the same time. So it almost sounds as though, at least from that little blurb, that the level of voltage is we're not going to be able to abate the level of voltage because it's similar to any number of docks, but rather we're going to need to do something to interrupt that metal to water that a person could touch metal and water at the same time. That's my quick take on what that reading was. So I will I put a little highlight on that, and I will ask the inspector if if that seems to be an accurate statement, and if so, maybe it bounces back to Public Works as to what can be done to modify or buffer the ability to touch water and metal dock at the same time.
Could it be as simple as replacing the dock with fiberglass floats?
Well,
Good.
if I could, this is kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it. We need to figure out where it's coming from.
But Duncan, if the level of voltage that's there is that which is similar to a number of other docks in the area, and it almost seems that it's just it's the natural state of affairs, and it's not something that we're going to cure with grounding rods or anything else. It's just I won't say it's a phenomena, but it's certainly a naturally or a regularly occurring situation.
I'm not so sure about that, my friend.
Okay, well,
That's coming from somewhere.
well, it sounds like it's coming from the substation.
There you go.
That's what the report says it's coming from.
Yeah, so
Yes.
if that's the case, we kind of know a path we can follow to address that.
I'm not sure you're going to get BG&E to move a whole substation. But
Maybe they'd buy a fiberglass dock though.
Alan's been putting his hand up.
I was just gonna say, I think I'll invite Bob and Patrick to our meeting next month and let them
Good
listen.
idea.
And then let's listen to see what Bob and Patrick that live here have to say.
yeah, that's fine. Just send me a reminder. What you're going to need to do is I'm always confused about who has the authority to invite whom. But I need to know when you see the note come out from Mark, which usually comes out about 10 days ahead of time with the Zoom details. Make sure you reach out to Mark and me with their email contact so that we can make sure they get on the invite list. All right, anything else for the good of the cause? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Whoever said that, because I think Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Duncan, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.